全抜きで浮揚する患者たち被害者の甘い期待を患い介護の機会をためらうとったゆえな問い食い知らず道の病巣に伏す患者たち初音づかしいされば早期に躊躇スペクターって閉じる方感この心に穴が開いたくらいなのにたったそれだけの次回なのにあなたの背中に滲んでくる遺恨が枯れそうもないのはどうしてなの病名は愛だ病名は愛だ病名は愛だ病名は愛だ
Preferably not, but
Okay,
you don't really.
Nim, you are a pile of rubbish. You are gonna lose, mate. If you're watching this, you're gonna lose. You are gonna absolutely get destroyed. Trust me.
Well, rumor has it you trained with one Hans Niemann. Do you feel like you're training? Were you confident that you're going to win the 15 moves before your training, and now you're confident
Here we got It's Like You're doing some trash talk.
Maybe. I don't know. I'm not gonna let my words justify my meanings. I'm not sure. I have to find out.
Not gonna let my
What
words.
Hans taught me is significant.
Not gonna let my words justify my meaning.
Was definitely eloquent, may I say. So I will use that ability to the max, and I will use it against Nim and win that victorious glory win.
Did you watch any of the games yesterday?
No.
No. He's like, no.
Europe versus Fusli? No.
No. He's like, no.
Stuff, I got business meetings outside, but I came back and I saw it. I saw him lose. I mean, listen. Let me just say this: Europe in this tournament is basically a free win. A free win to that group. Honest to God, like I was unbalanced. I have Nim. Okay, I have Chocobars. Maybe Chocobars is a main TFT player, but then we got Forsen. This is a struggle for me. But then for me, I won't say it's a struggle. I might be able to win. But
you're also free to express yourself how you want. So if you need to drop some curses to be confident, go for it right now.
Wait, what?
Yeah, I was just trying to see if you would listen when I said you couldn't curse. You're allowed to do whatever you want.
Oh, right. No. I mean, I respect each surroundings. I don't need to curse. Why should I curse? If I'm going to be a chess player, there's no need to curse. You see, I think rage shows your weak side. It does. I'm not in a raging mood.
I thought he was gonna say, I think rage.
Where are you?
I think he's buried himself underground. He's too afraid. Well, on that note, we will let you go so you can get ready for your game, but we wish you the best of luck, Slicker, and make it a good one.
Thank you, man.
Okay, I guess it's Slicker. I thought it was It's Liker.
Damn, he's good looking.
Well, that was Slicker for everybody. He is such a fun guy. He's great at many games playing Counter-Strike, and he's adding chess to his repertoire. And just a reminder to everybody, the format...
I'm not calling him Slicker, okay? I'm calling him Sliker. There's only one K. There's no C in there.
You let that know, Danya.
No, it's Slicker. Sliker.
How did that go, boys? Please tell me how did that go? How did that go, boys? Where's my fucking shit camera? Shit, I'm swearing already. Wait.
I think rage. Is that what I thought he said?
Come back. Why do I hear someone? Who's speaking? Hello? someone.
Hello?
Who's this?
Slicker, you're still in the call, man. You're in the Zoom call,
my
bro.
bad.
Hey, do you guys hear me?
Nim, you gonna lose.
Yeah.
He's still in the call. Yeah, he's like dancing right for like 1 minute right before he's getting in the zone. He's pumped. Slicker is pumped. Okay, Slicker is pumped. Now I don't know if Nim is as pumped as Slicker. I actually think Slicker's gonna win this one. He's in the zone. He's getting his brain ready. He's thinking rage. He's he's ready.
The shield, the ice skater, the lobster pincer will all be chess terminology. It's not one.
I need to actually like / follow him, but I don't know his username. They need to show his username. Here we go. They haven't showed the names yet. Yeah, so today we have Nim versus its Slicker, and then XQC versus Yasuo. And they're showing Fusli's crazy win yesterday. Yeah, Fusli really took that game. I really didn't think that A-Rob would fall for the Queen H5 at the end of that, and then it happened. So that happened. That happened. That happened. That happened. Yeah, they're really getting it right down to the wire here.
Everything you could ask for from a new chess student, right? Identify the hidden pieces, take them, put your knights on outposts in the center. I mean, this is a model game. And after the knight was captured, she brought her bishop to d3, went for the kingside attack, and E-Rob fell right for it. Castled queen h5, and brought his queen in, which would be good in other circumstances, but unfortunately checkmated 1 was unleashed on h7. Queen b2. That move is going to go down in history. Triple exclam.
Triple exclam for sure.
He was going for breaking open the queen side, playing on this b file.
Okay, now he's on an ad break.
First shave, I barely.
Yeah, we're just waiting for the game to start. They're going through the previous games from yesterday. I need to know the username of its Slicker or Nim. And I missed you guys, but thanks to the follow, Sherwood Forest and Tuvai. You followed while I was sleeping. Thank you very much. Yeah, we will get a username in a second. Then I can / follow. And we can watch the match. Please bear with me. You can expect to see, I mean, I don't know, we can't expect anything, because the thing about chess is, like, we can judge players based on their previous games, but, you know, anybody could always improve their game, and they could always, like, just surprise us. So you can say, like, oh, we're going to expect queen blunders, we're going to expect all this stuff, and it's like, well, you know, maybe this is going to be the game where they just finally, like, just clutch, and they're able to come in and just like completely just have solid fundamentals, develop all their pieces, control the center, castle, and make like, you know, some minor positional, like maybe this is the game that these players finally see the ultimate wooden shield, because that's how chess works. Chess is just like Dragon Ball. It's at any time you can improve and just skyrocket and show the ultimate wooden shield to your opponent. So after this, I'm going to be watching Botez live. Chiyu is covering Alexandra versus Alexandra Alexandra versus Alexandra in the U.S. chess women match that's going on right now, and hopefully I can check out Hikaru playing against Alexander Grishuk. So that's the other stuff to be watching right now, but I'm covering this right now. Okay, so it's Nimnian. Nimnian. Like an onion, but Nim. Okay, good. Now I'm now following Nimnian.
Fuck. I've been playing as both colors. How did they decide that shit? Oh my god, my neighbor across.
Didn't he already? He should have already known. They should have already told him what color he was playing. Okay, so we got Nim playing the black pieces. I'm gonna cover black pieces today, I guess. Yesterday we were looking at white's point of view. Let's look at black's point of view this game and the next game. All right, so we got e6 being played, covering d5. So far, really just kind of fundamentals already. We have white coming in to control the center, with the bishop out, and looks like he did get the bishop outside of the pawn chain. So Slicker is a GM Slicker, excuse me. Slicker is paying attention to that. But so far also as well, you know, Nim bringing out his knight, you know, making sure to bring out your knights to develop, making sure that your pawn structure is set up correctly, controlling f5, which is not particularly useful this early in the game, but we see that everything's covered. Okay, so he's making that hat, as Fusli calls it. So Slicker's going. He looks like he did watch that game with Fusli, so he's trying to reproduce that, which is good because in chess, you know, a lot of the times, you know, especially with opening systems, you know, like you play the same stuff in the opening, and it's really not the opening that decides most of our games. It's going to be stuff that we do in the middle game, and you know, it's good. It's good that he's following Fusli's example and continuing with the hat. This is definitely a good opening. Okay, so Nim already making the first inaccuracy. Maybe he wants to trade that off and screw up the pawn chain. So that's the only reason I can think of bringing the bishop to d6, because otherwise this bishop is blocking that pawn. And so that's one of the first, like when I talk about strategy with students, I usually talk about like, well, you know, kind of positional ideas, is that this isn't like by itself like an inaccuracy or a blunder. I mean, it's an inaccuracy. Like this in itself isn't like a bad move, but because it blocks this pawn, that is poor positional play, because now unless you're planning to trade off that bishop to ruin the pawn structure and double up these pawns, which is probably what he's planning on doing, except now he's not even, I don't think he's forced to do it, although White could have, Slicker could have played g3. And so I really think Nim, if he really wants to follow through with that bishop move, he should take that bishop, because then the pawn will take, and then he can move his pawn forward and castle. And but it's good. He's still thinking about fundamentals, he's getting rid of any chances on this g5 square. So then he's gonna castle, get his pieces protected. Although there is still this bishop, so I still think that if you're gonna move your bishop in front of your pawn, you better get rid of it soon. But it looks like he's not. I mean, because g3 hasn't been played, so he really hasn't been forced to do this. But at the same time, if g3 is ever played, well, no, then you wouldn't really want to take with g3 because you'd be exposing your king. So there's, this is actually some really solid chess right here. Although, except this pawn is blocked. That's the only problem, but it's so early in the opening that maybe it's not a big deal. Maybe he did some preparation here. Maybe there's actually been some, maybe he was actually like, studying black pieces and what to do against the London because he saw Fuseli win. And he's like, okay, how can I deal with that bishop or that kingside? And he probably said, oh, maybe I can bring the bishop out there. I could trade off this dark squared bishop and get rid of that pawn structure completely. And just, and now h6 is played. So now you never have to worry about queen h5, especially as long as this knight's here. But, yeah, it doesn't look like that knight is really going to be going anywhere because this pawn would have to move 2 squares in order to attack that. And also the bishop and knight are protecting that square. And of course, like I said, this bishop is probably coming off the board at some point. And now at this point, though, like now white is starting to get a stronghold on this e-file. So maybe not so good, but at least, like, if you take that bishop off now, you at least double up pawns on the f-file. And, I don't know, you can at least get your pawns developed, maybe even to d5. Something to think about. Yeah, but yeah, like both players seem to be taking their time. Well, Slicker's not really taking his time. Looks like he's really not out of his preparation. Okay, and now we see the idea here is to attack the is to attack this bishop. There are 3 pieces defending, and there's 3 pieces defending. So if you start the attack, you're going to end up losing some material. So if you take the knight, if you take the pawn, if knight takes, bishop takes, and then if bishop takes, rook takes. So you just move the bishop back. So maybe you'd want to start out with the bishop, and then the bishop takes, knight takes, and then you're threatening to take either of these. Okay, so the knight takes, you're threatening these pieces to trade, which isn't like a huge deal in its own, but like it will change the position, especially getting rid of a bishop. If you get rid of if Slicker allows this knight takes knight, if Slicker allows knight takes bishop, then there will no longer be a light squared bishop aiming at h7, and that is definitely an imbalance. That's definitely a change in the position. So, very good incentive, kind of some incentive to trade off the bishop for the knight, maybe, because this bishop, this dark squared bishop is, I don't know. I would feel like both players would want to trade off their dark squared bishop at this point, and so like okay. He's getting rid of that, where he wants his queen. He's trying to think, okay, well, if you capture my bishop, I want my queen to go there. So Slicker is actually thinking, like, very strategically. Thinks, like, he wants to get, like, when you move your bishop that's already going to get captured to another square that'll still be get captured, it's because you're thinking, I want to bring this queen to that square instead of this square. And so that's some very in-depth chess analysis. That's like a new level here. For somebody his rating, that's very deep. Like you almost never see players think like that. You never see players play like where they're trying to reposition pieces, where they're still trading off material, but getting the hey, eek, hey, Elite Chess Lounge. Okay, so this is just a straight up blunder. Queen. Oh no, it's not. Never mind. Why didn't the queen take? I guess he really wants this queen lined up. Okay, so this is trouble for Slicker now. Hey, Elite Chess Lounge, we're just covering Pogchamps. This is some huge trouble for Slicker now. This queen was guarding the f3 square. And now Nim is just happy to trade off that dark squared bishop, and now this pawn is no longer encumbered. And there's tripled pawns after this. This is just like it's equal material, but is it really equal? Because there's 3 pawns. There's 3 pawns lined up on the f file. This is pandemonium. This is oh, and he just continues to tilt. Now you could just save the bishop. Just move the bishop back, or even back here, or back here. No, you wouldn't want to move back there because the pawn would just take. This is huge. Nim is going to take this first round. Nim is going to win unless he completely just throws the game away. GM Slicker and the 700 rating, I know exactly. We already know that Slicker is definitely playing like a GM because he's tilted. And Well, I mean, I guess if you say in the sense that he's tilted, then he's, things that are common to all chess players. Uh, so yeah, now Nim is just completely just all he has to do is protect all his pieces, trade off equally, or I mean, trade off pieces for pieces, make sure there's less pieces on the board. This is going to be a pretty boring game from here, most likely. This is kind of how it goes. Like in chess, it's exciting until it's not. When you're playing chess, like you're really kind of like just battling and prodding and saying like, is my opponent going to slip? And then you make plans, and the best of us make plans, and I'm definitely not one of the best of us, but we make plans in the game, and we forget about our plans. We forget that there's a queen guarding the square instead of a pawn. And then not only that, but I mean that alone is kind of bad, but not like game losing, because it does expose the king. But at least you're still equal material. But when your opponent takes a piece and you don't capture it back, instead you move a knight that doesn't really do anything. When it's protecting a piece that's already protected. But the piece that was attacking this piece moved, and so it's kind of strange that you wouldn't capture back the piece that just captured a piece. Maybe he was just too excited. Maybe. Oh, it looks like Nim traded off, gave away his piece. So now we're back to equality again. I I am dumbfounded. Okay, I am dumbfounded that you would be up an entire piece and then just throw it away. This is actually now the game's exciting again, but at least I still feel like Nim is still doing better here, because you just retreat your bishop back to e7 or something, and this king is completely exposed. There's just this queen is attacking that pawn, but like now you have the rook lined up on the king side. Now you just have to like figure out how white does have some counterplay trying to attack this knight, for example, because this rook is completely undefended if that knight's gone. And so there are chances for white to get rid of defenders and try to mess up black's position, but Nim is pretty much like solid with his pawn structure, and just has to get his pieces in the game. Like, for example, bishop g4 would be a strong attack against the queen, because the knight's defending, and if the queen can't take because the knight will take. Yeah, so he found that move, and looks like this looks like Nim, he is up a pawn, but not only that, the king is completely Slicker's king is completely exposed. So there's really no going back. But at the same time, like we saw earlier, Slicker gave away a piece, but then Nim gave away a piece, and now he ends up a pawn, and there is a positional advantage, but at the same time, like that's like insane. Like maybe he's getting worried about the time, because you could see Nim has spent a lot of time in this game, and maybe he started getting worried about time trouble. I guess he forgot about the increment. There is a 5-second increment. Oops. Yeah, there is a 5-second increment, I believe, and 5 seconds doesn't sound like a lot, but when you get into time trouble and when you need to move, like 5 seconds can be an eternity compared to 0. Because when you have 5 seconds to move, you don't have to worry about the game ever ending based on time, as long as you can play within 5 seconds. But maybe he's not that confident in his endgame abilities, so there's always a thing, time pressure. Maybe he said, okay, I need to play quickly, and then he ended up dropping the piece that was his huge advantage. And maybe you got to give Nim some credit. Maybe he's been listening to the lessons and all the commentary, and been hearing that when you're ahead, you need to trade off pieces. When you're ahead, you need to trade off pieces. The problem is if you're not trading off evenly, quote unquote, where if you trade your opponent, if you're up material, you just trade off pieces, where you trade off a piece for a piece, like an eye for an eye. So if you trade a pawn, they should get a pawn back, not a piece, or etc., etc. So if you're up a bishop, or if you're up a piece, you need to be able to capture a piece, and then they capture the piece back, because you're getting +3, and then you're +6 for a second, and then you -3 because they take the piece, and now you're still +3. So you need to make sure that everything is equal. Like it's very difficult for, I think, because a lot of FPS players, and I heard XQC talking about this at one point, is because when you're playing FPS games, you see your enemy and you just start shooting. And it's not quite the same way in chess. And it's like a lot of the stuff in FPS games, especially team games like Counter-Strike, a lot of it is very chess-like. Because you'll have a team of people maneuvering around a map, and you'll be doing specific things, and you'll be working with your team to communicate what you need to be doing. And basically, it's almost like you're moving the pieces around on a chessboard. The difference is that all the pieces are pretty much equal. Obviously, somebody who's planning the bomb is like, priority number one, um, or somebody who's freeing the hostages, or et cetera, et cetera. So if you're playing Counter Strike or something, if you see an enemy, you shoot them, right? Like, but in chess, like, not all the pieces are equal. Like, a piece is worth 3, a queen is worth 9, a pawn is worth 1. We use the pawn as a counter for all the pieces. And it really, I mean, a lot of newer players, they think that they can get away with it. That you can just say, like, okay, well, I'm just going to trade off pieces, I can still win. But the thing is, if your opponent really knows what they're doing, like they know how to get into an endgame, and they know how to deliver checkmate, then there's really no going back from a piece loss when you're down material. I mean, even down a pawn, if you're strong enough as a player, if you understand your fundamentals, if you understand your end games, if you know how to trade off, and you know how to play carefully, and to make sure that your opponent doesn't get checkmate or anything like that. I mean, it's not that easy. It's really not that easy. But at the same time, you'll see a lot of beginners who don't even think about material. They just say, like, okay, well, I won your queen, but they don't realize that they just also lost a queen. And I notice I'll see time and time again with absolute beginners. They're afraid to put their queen in the line of fire because they don't want to lose their queen, but they're not losing their queen because they captured their opponent's queen. And so it's like an eye for an eye. And as soon as students understand that, there's this huge moment where it's like, I try to tell my students, it's like a game of tug of war. Like, if you pull a queen, you pull it to that side, but then you pull their queen back and it gets right back to the center. And so it's like, your goal is to keep it on this side. Doesn't matter if it's temporarily tilted, because you'll bring it back and immediately. Or even, especially if you have some calculations where you can say, okay, I can also win a pawn in this situation because I can do this, this, and then my opponent's going to capture, but then I still able to capture that piece back, and it ends up being equal, except not equal, but you're actually now up in pawn or something. And that's kind of how you play chess. So it looks like this, it's still not quite, it's still not quite obvious how to proceed here as black or white. And Slicker is starting to get some play in the center. Hey, Kapska. So Slicker's starting to get some play in the center, and it's not quite clear. And how are you going to defend this rook? You can come over to rook h5, but then the bishop comes over to bishop e2, and then what are you going to do with your rook? Maybe you can move back to rook f3. There might even be some draws here. Maybe GM Slicker really going to earn that title, that GM title, by being able to turn this game into a draw. Very GM-like thing to do is to not just look at winning, but say, hey, wait, maybe I can draw if I attack that rook. If you want to save the rook, and not lose the exchange, then you're going to have to move this rook over to f5. And if you just move this bishop back, well, then you have to move it back, and then you could just do threefold repetition, except maybe he doesn't see that. So there is a chance to save this rook now, but how is the question? I would say knight e4. Oh, and I guess, like, if you did move the rook here, and then you moved here, and then you moved the bishop here, you would just move the knight to e4. Oh, now you can't because the pawn takes. Yeah, so earlier in the position, knight e4 was an option, attacking the queen, but not only that, the main thing is that it's freeing up the f5 square for the rook. And so if you ever move the bishop here, you could just tuck the bishop. Oh no, you would just tuck the. Okay. There are things to think about here. Okay, so now you're gonna attack. So now you have to move the rook here. Oh, but now if you move here, the bishop can take. Okay. Oh, and also the pawn can take. Okay. So bishop's going to take the pawn after rook f5. But yeah, you'll see absolute beginners, like, over and over. They'll just, like, be afraid to trade pieces. They'll, oh, okay, never mind. Yeah, actually, yeah, that's, now Slicker is going to be up a pawn here. Or actually, no, Nim's still up, yeah. Slicker's up a pawn here. This is really crazy here. There are some chances, but like I said, I think what they're doing is that they're listening to their advice of their coaches, which is, if you're up material, you trade off pieces. But I think it's one thing, to understand that. I think that's actually the most important part. Is it's what I call the Hulk method of chess. When you teach your students just like the big, giant, sweeping principles, because in the very first Hulk, um, in the very first Incredible Hulk, before all the Avengers and stuff, um, there was this line in the movie where he said, "I may not be able to control my anger, but maybe I can throw it at the problem." And so I teach my students who are absolute beginners, because absolute beginners, they're just learning how the pieces move. They're not, they don't even understand certain things, and so I just like give them like the sweeping giant like basic fundamentals, and they're gonna like not understand it at first. They're not gonna really like fully grasp it, but the thing is they're gonna start thinking about it, and they can gradually refine it as they go. So you may throw your opponent like across the room, and they land on like a target, but like they're like 50 feet away from the target, which is still like they still got them close to the target, but it's still not on the target. And then next time it's 49 feet, and then maybe 45 feet, and then maybe 30 feet, and then maybe 10 feet, and then 9 feet, etc., etc. And you gradually get to where you're getting like 0.000001 feet next to the target, and that's pretty close. It's not perfect. You're never going to be perfect. You're infinitely getting closer to getting right on the target. But at the same time, like, you can't expect your opponent to get right on the target. And if you try to do that at first, they're probably going to get frustrated. They're probably going to quit, and they're probably not going to be as effective as if you just told them like giant sweeping things like, if you're up material, trade off pieces, which they did this game. But now Nim is just completely winning in the end game here, as long as he doesn't like trade off the rook even if you trade off the rook for the piece, actually, it would still be winning because of the pawns. However, then it would be a test to see if Nim really knows how to do his pawn end games, because this is actually not quite that simple. He still, he has to get his king into the game. He has to bring things in. This is actually kind of a complex ending, even with the rook. It's still winning, but it's not clear cut right now. You still have to do a lot of like kind of maneuvering around. You got to attack the knight. You got to, like try to trade off. It might even be easiest just to trade off the rook for the knight, and then get the king into the center, take one of those pawns, make a pass pawn, and make a queen, and then checkmate with the queen and king. Like, it takes a long time, and he has 18 seconds, so he has to make every single move within 5 seconds, basically. And so anything can happen at that point. Slicker might actually be having good chances of winning by time here. So you have to take the clock into the equation. Because like, even though he's completely like down a piece and a pawn, Nim has only 20 seconds left, and even with increment, for a player at his level, judging by his play so far, at his level, 20 seconds is actually not a ton of time, even with increment. And so this actually could go for Slicker's favor. He could just be going for, okay, I'm just going to move as fast as possible, trying not to completely throw away the game, try to avoid checkmate. Like you'd have to take that pawn. So pawn takes, and then you move you can't move the king. Okay, so that's the problem. Is you can't, okay, so Nim's going to be able to promote. So maybe he's going to start going the opposite direction, maybe try to, okay, but he's not going to let that happen. Nim's actually playing some pretty solid endgame here. Because the rook is guarding the king cannot come over to defend this pawn. And so even if you do capture this pawn, the pawn just goes up forward, and then the knight has to, okay, so now he completely ruined his chances at defending against queening. So by moving that pawn, you needed to capture the pawn captures, and then knight to knight b3. not only you're defending this, but you're also attacking the rook. Although, no, then the rook would just come. So yeah, anything but moving the pawn, because now the knight can't come to defend. And you can't move the king to defend. The queen's going to come out. Then the king's going to come here. And then it's just going to be... It's going to be a checkmate. Maybe you come out towards the center. But then you just attack this way. You could always get the queen to cover these squares. There's all sorts of stuff going on. This is going to win. Unless he can't win in 20 seconds with increment, which is definitely a real thing. Now, as long as he keeps at least one pawn. If he loses all of his pawns, it'll end up being a draw by insufficient material. Because the way chess.com works, you know, if you end up winning on time, it ends up being, but you have insufficient material to win. So if you only have the knight and all these pawns are gone, then it actually ends up being a draw because insufficient material to deliver win. If you could technically, keyword technically, win the game, if you could technically win the game, like if you still have a pawn, then it'll be declared a win if you win on time. But if you can't turn, like I think it does calculate table bases. Like if you have a pawn that cannot possibly promote in the position, then I think it does clear a draw, but maybe it's not that advanced. Maybe it's only just like insufficient material. So I don't actually know the actual inner workings of how it works on chess.com, but it is looking like, okay, now he just throws away the knight. This is just completely winning for black here. Nim is going to be going home happy unless he just completely loses on time. And now, but I mean, he can at least, at the very worst, at this point, if he at least captures these pawns, if Nim at least captures these pawns, okay, he moves. Okay. If he at least captures these pawns, then at least he can. The worst he can expect is a draw of timeout. But at this point, he can go in for a checkmate. Okay, he's gonna make another queen. He's not even gonna mess around with trying to get checkmate. A common strategy for when beginner players are low on time is to just okay, now he might be seeing some checks here now. A common strategy for people losing on time when they don't know how to deliver checkmate is just make another queen. Although if you make too many queens, there's a huge chance you're gonna miss stalemate. Because the more queens that are on the board against a lone king without clear, like, you know, checks each turn, the more likely there's going to be a stalemate. But at this point, there's so many squares that the king can go to, that, you know, it's not going to be stalemate if you make a queen. I'm going to just start giving checks. Okay, he made a rook. Wow. Why'd he do that? Why'd he make rooks? He could have made queens. Oh, he knows he's winning. He offered a draw. What's with these players offering draws? Are you serious? Slicker. Don't offer a draw when you're losing by a huge margin. Okay, checkmate. Oh, he missed the checkmate. Either way, it's going to be checkmate. Soon. Dude, does he not see the checkmates? There's an escalator. Jeez. Oh, no. Yeah, just play here, and then the king moves, and then, yeah, there you go. Okay. All he has to do is block these off, and then checkmates. Okay, now he can do it again. He's going to miss it. He missed it. He doesn't see it. And he has plenty of time on the clock now. He has a minute. Increment really adds a lot of time to the game. People underestimate the power of increments. People definitely underestimate the power of increments. I can't believe he would offer a draw when he's just this much losing. I don't think they understand that draws are not like your opponent does not have to accept the draw. I mean, I guess they're like clinging on to hope, but it's kind of pathetic, really. Like it's like if you're playing Counter-Strike and you have one member left and your opponent has two members left. And then you say, "Hey, want to just draw?" Like, no, there's like you play to the end. That one person could technically win that round. So why would you offer a draw when when you can still win? And you can't win, but like, either resign or play it out. Is he gonna time him out? Is he seriously gonna time him out? Slicker, don't do that. That's a low blow. Making him wait for the win. This is why we have these rules in FIDE. This is why we have these rules. Not to time out your opponent. Obviously, in this kind of time control, it's not too big of a deal because like it's only like 1 minute. But like that's why we have these rules for like when you have 2 hours on your clock. If you're just gonna sit there with an hour on your clock and you're losing, you can get disqualified from a tournament. So it's good to know that like there are certain things that we need to do differently for classical chess that we can't quite like. But I also think it's good to note that rapid and blitz requires a different approach for format. Like I feel like a lot of people want to stick to this is the way we do it. This is the way we do it, and like FIDE especially, but well, not really necessarily FIDE, but some people, and the thing is like classical will always be classical. It'll always, we have the FIDE rules for a reason, and the formats. Maybe it might be better to start scoring things by a win is 3 and a draw is 1, because with half for a draw, there's really not too much of an incentive to get a win over a draw. Sometimes, but if the incentive is that if your opponent gets if your opponent's in the tournament, okay, yeah, and he finally found the checkmate. If the alternative is that your opponents in the tournament get more points for winning, then you're less likely to try to go for a draw. If you know that like, oh, I'm only going to get 1 point, but then this other person in the tournament got a win, and now they're 3, and now they're 2 more points than me, which is kind of a huge difference. Then, oh, if I get a draw, I'm still only a half a point behind if they win, and if they draw, then we're neck and neck. Like that's kind of like I think that would change a lot of things in chess if we give a win 3 points and we give a draw 1 point. In fact, they already use this in a lot of games in board games like I believe they do use a similar system for like Jiangqi in China. I'm not sure though. I think they use 2 points for a win and 1 point for a draw. So it's the same as if it was half and 1. It's still kind of ridiculous to have half a point instead of just 1 and 2. Just change the numbers. Just be like, okay, well, let's take away halves from the equation. Like, let's just use even numbers and odd numbers. Like it makes more sense, right? But if you're gonna still use that system, but I think 3 and 1 and 0. So you can have 3 0 instead of 1 0, and then you can have 1 1 instead of half half. I think that gives a lot more incentive to try to play for a win. And it also makes draws a lot more devastating for both players. So it's like, I don't know. I feel like, so a lot of things went wrong this game. This was actually perfect play in the opening. The only thing that wasn't perfect is I still think this bishop in front of the pawn on d7, playing this bishop to d6, it looked like Nim's plan was to take that bishop off and then mess up Slicker's pawn structure. So that's the first thing. It's fine that he didn't do that. Like, it ended up being okay. However, Slicker made a huge mistake here. Moving the knight here. This bishop is hanging, but it's not attacked. And meanwhile, you just lost a piece. And it sucks. Oh no, he didn't want to lose the queen. Never mind, that's why. Okay, I didn't even realize that. Yeah, so he had to lose a piece. So that's actually pretty clever. Okay, I didn't see that in the moment. It happened so fast. I didn't realize. That's actually some really clever play. So Nim had a really strong combination. I think it could have gone differently if, let's see, if he just took the knight. If you took the knight, bishop takes. Yeah, if you take the knight here with the bishop instead of allowing this. And also, this was a mistake. The queen could have gotten out of the line of fire for the rook. And not only that, you would save your pawn structure. So that was the second mistake, is the queen needed to come over to capture that knight instead of the pawn. So the queen needed to capture. And then after that, it's just downhill because now this pawn is pinned, sadly, because the queen is on the same file as the rook. So this game still would have gone well, I think, for Slicker if he just took with the queen. Because then, now if you trade off the bishop, so if you take with the queen, if now you take with the bishop, now you still double up your pawns, but at least now you can take with the pawn in your equal material. And you don't have to worry about the queen getting taken. Taked. You don't have to worry about the queen getting taked. Before that, though, yeah, I think that's the first mistake, is that taking with the pawn. Either way, I still think that if you wanted to move this bishop here, if you wanted to move this bishop in front of the pawn, you weren't necessarily forced to do that, even if g3 was played. This probably shouldn't have been the way he moved forward. Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, this is just completely winning for black. But let me get the board back. But after this, so he does the same thing, except he doesn't need to ignore it because there's no pin on the queen or anything. And so after this, all you have to do is just move your bishop back again. And it sucks because you have to block this pawn, but just remember, you're already up an entire piece. You're okay with having temporary, you're okay with kind of weakening your position because you completely don't, you're controlling this semi-open file. This pawn really can't do much. You can always just play c6 and get this bishop tucked away somewhere, probably bishop c7. There's plenty of things you can do that, and you're gonna be fine. All you have to do is just keep this material, this material advantage. So yeah, definitely some mistakes were played. And then it was still winning for Nim here. Except here, this is just a huge mistake. You already lost a rook, but you need to at least take the queen back, and then after check, you just move your king forward. I mean, I guess either way it works. Either way, black's up a rook for a rook. Yeah, and a lot of things went, Nim could have played better here. I mean, this is fine. He's just trying to play carefully, but as soon as this happened, there was definitely a mate that could have happened. Like, all you had to do was just check, 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 and mate. And he missed that. He missed that. He missed stuff like that. All you had to do was just escalator your opponent down the board to the side of the board. Remember, the sides of the boards aren't just the top and bottom. Remember, it's a completely, I mean, it's two-dimensional, but there's 4 sides. There's 4 sides to the board, and you checkmate your opponent on any side. Any side. Doesn't matter which side. Doesn't matter if it's the top, the bottom, or the left side, or the right side. I mean, the king side or queen side. You can checkmate your opponent anywhere in this zone. Anyway, thanks for stopping by for the first game of the day. I will be back at 2 p.m. Pacific time to cover the second game. So stay tuned. I will be back shortly to do some tactics, etc. I'm just taking a quick break, so I'll be back. We're back. Alright, so you guys ready? 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 I'm just waiting to see, I forgot what XQC's username is. Let me look at his stream to see his, because he's streaming right now. Where does it say his username? Let me look. Look at players. Oh. Doesn't show him in the observing. He's doing some puzzles right now, really warming up. It's really good. I need to look like through his clips in order to see what his name is on chess.com. There we go. XQCOW1. Unable to. Oh, he's not in live chat. Oh, oops. There's 98.2 thousand people watching on the chess category right now. That's insane, you guys. Like, that's absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. Yeah, XQCOW, not a 0, it's O. Yeah, he should be getting into live chess shortly. There is like 1 minute left before the round starts. I'll see as soon as he's still in puzzles right now. Yeah, I feel like this is actually going to be a really good battle because XQC has been doing a lot of practice. You know, he is a gamer, okay? Like, he's not just some random guy just, like, you know, memeing. He is a gamer. You know, he's a grandmaster in Overwatch, plays all these other games. He's a gamer. And you know what gamers do is when they have a game, no matter what the game it is, they're going to do their best to try to get better. And so is Yasuo. This is actually going to be, you know, all these challengers, like, obviously some of them are going to be a little imbalanced, but as we go on in this tournament, I feel like we're going to get some more, like, evenly matched players and, you know, just matchups where people are playing, like, you know, similarly strength opponents. And that's really what this is all about, you know, seeing people fight for the victory, you know. They really want that, you know, that prize money. I mean, I laugh, but it's $10,000, like, for first in championship brackets. So, $10,000. I mean, no matter how much money you have, it's still $10,000. Like that's $10,000 more than you had before. So, I feel like, okay. It looks like he's in live chess now. You are now following XQCOW1. Okay, so the game should start as soon as, you know, we should be able to start.
Guys, I forgot to read the rules of the tournament. I don't know where to go.
I forgot to read the rules of the tournament.
I'm supposed to join this.
I think he's trolling. I think he knows exactly what he needs to do.
My Zoom's updating.
Oh, he didn't even have Zoom open. Oh god, he's trolling so hard, you guys. That's some real trolling. He wasn't even in the Zoom call. Doesn't have Zoom updated. That's hilarious. That's so hilarious. Hikaru been boot camping. I mean, he's really been like coaching him a lot lately. I mean, you get enough coaching, and you can really start making some real improvements. Even a little bit of coaching goes a long way. I've had like 2 lessons from WNM Lisa Orlova, a third coming up in about 2 weeks. So in about 2 weeks, there's going to be another lesson with Orlova Chess on my channel. So look forward to that. But even a small amount of coaching can like change a lot of things. Like you start like thinking about things differently. You start hearing your coach's voice about the kind of advice they give you, and just like all sorts of stuff just happen. And I really feel like chess is exploding right now because of Hikaru and Alexandra Botez and chess.com and XQC. Like all this collaboration really exploding. Like there's like 100,000 people watching on on chess category right now, spread across chess.com and XQC and Yasuo. It's like that's giant. Okay, I mean obviously I'm some small streamer nobody knows exists. Okay, I'm on the bottom of the category. Okay, I understand that part. Okay, but you can't ignore the fact that more people is more likelihood that somebody's gonna wander into my stream. Okay, like if only like 1 or 2 people out of 100,000 wander into my stream. Oh, that scared me. Hey, Magnu Martins, thanks for the follow. Let me turn off follow mode. I was doing that the other day because I was getting trolled really hard. I forgot that I had 10-minute follower mode on. Sorry about that. 1 week follower mode? There's actually a 1 week follower mode. Like seriously. Yes, I was getting trolled pretty hard. It actually wasn't too big of a deal. I was just banning the people that were trolling, but at the same time, it was like, I guess some Elite Chess Lounge was modding, and he just like enabled 10-minute follower mode. And I'm like, whatever. It was okay. I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna get more. The fact of it's good to get trolls, even though they suck. It's still good because the more trolls, the more likely there's gonna be non-trolls. I try to look at it that way. I try to look at the positivity. All right, the game's starting. So XQC, I already knew he was playing the black pieces, and so we're starting off with the E4 pawn opening. So maybe he's used to this by now, but it looks like E4 is a very tactical opening, and so you have to be prepared as white. You have to be prepared for the French. You have to be prepared for the king's pawn opening. You have to be prepared for Sicilian. To be prepared for Caro-Kann. He's just going straight for king's pawn open. This is the open game. So he's just going for straight, like just standard stuff. You're gonna play playing knight c6 here, and maybe we're gonna have a Rui Lopez, or maybe we're gonna have an Italian game. Who knows? Maybe I'm guessing we're gonna have an Italian game, and in that we're gonna have Rui Lopez. So you could just continue developing here, or you could just push this bishop out. There's different options. If you do attack the bishop, you can go backwards, and then eventually after developing after b5, then you can go over to b3. And you're maintaining this diagonal over here on f7 specifically. Okay, so you have 2 choices. Okay, it looks like he went straight for the stuff that he knows. And he went straight for that. He didn't even want to mess around. You don't technically have to develop your people in the chat spamming like anime memes, anime ASCII art. So yeah, you could have gone for that, but this is just going straight for what you're going to end up with. You're not required to go for this right away. The alternative was taking the knight. Instead of moving the bishop back. A lot of people like to play this way, and then contrary to what you're used to, there's a principle that you usually capture your pawns toward the center, but in the Rui Lopez, when you capture here, you actually want to open up your d file. It's kind of counterintuitive, part of theory. So maybe this bishop's going to come out here. There's lots of escape squares here, and then maybe get the bishop lined over here, and then maybe you're going to get some control over these diagonals over here. So then you're probably okay. So you're going to go directly for the center. There's 2 pieces defending and 2 pieces attacking. Whoever starts the trade loses that trade. So if white decides to trade here, then you just take with the knight, and this knight can't be captured. Not really losing the trade, but definitely like. After bishop e6, then black is controlling the center over there. You definitely do not have to capture. You could just castle. There's lots of different things you can do here. You could just continue development, but then you would play d4. Then you'd have to move the knight again. But if you wanted to, if your goal was to move the knight over to the king side, then maybe that's what you'd want to do. But I'm not sure if giving black the center would be worth it. All right, so you do just go for the trade. You have to take with the knight. Knight's temporarily somewhat hanging. If you know, it is kind of problematic because if you play c5 here, if you play c4 here, if you take, okay, so he's not going to do that. So he can play bishop e6, and then if you play c5, takes, and then you could just move knight b6, or you could move back to knight f6. Lots of different options here that you can do. So far, everything's just like kind of like even. Everything's balanced. Not really too much going on in the position, but I mean there is like some chances. But okay, so he's really going for, like, you know, he's really following these principles that Hikaru's been teaching him, you know, like pinning this knight. And there's no longer a bishop that can unpin that. So now you could just take that and the queen would take, or he could just play back to bishop h5. I would probably play bishop h5. You could always come back to bishop g6, play h6, and you'd have an escape square on h7. So there's lots of different things you can do there. Maybe you could even, at some point, you bring the queen over to f6, and then you could start putting pressure on this knight here. Maybe eventually somehow get this pawn away from this file and then push this pawn. Ideas like bishop d6 could happen. All sorts of different ideas. You still need a castle, so you do need to play, after you save this bishop, maybe you're going to push the pawns, which would kind of weaken your king side. Since you are castled king side, maybe you would not want to push your pawns out. So after bishop d6, you would obviously just take the bishop. So bishop h5, if you do something else, like if you develop your knight, maybe you could just trade off and double up pawns at that point. So maybe you'd want to play knight b d2, then you could play bishop d6, and then you can get ready to castle. Maybe g4 would happen, and then you just play bishop g6, you're fine. And it is slightly weakened, but at least, like, you know, white's pawn structure is a little bit kind of wonky over here on the king side, exposing the king, but there's no real immediate attack, even if that were the case. Even if g4 is played, there's no immediate attack. So not terrible for white, but definitely like weakening his structure. So Yasuo is really kind of following a lot of really fundamentals, but so is XQC. XQC is playing a little bit more aggressive. Probably a side effect of studying with Hikaru. Hikaru's are, you know, like attacking samurai, you know. If you look at his subscription page, his, you know, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 subscription page, there's an excellent picture of him in samurai with the samurai armor. It's freaking awesome. Hikaru knows who he is. It's a very like kind of powerful thing. You could just play bishop d6 here, like I said, just defending this pawn. Okay, you could also play there. That is kind of interesting. And like I said earlier, now you have this a7 escape square, so now you always have that option. And also it puts more defenders on the d4 square. So the d4, so it actually looks like he's really paying attention to squares here. This knight's now pinned because of this bishop. So if I were playing white, I'd play g4 to get rid of that pin. But you're still, there's still even without this knight, there's there's 3 attackers for black and 0 attackers from white. So even if you do get this knight added, so if you do play g4 and get this bishop moved, then you're still like, not only did you ruin your king side a little bit since you castled king side, but not only that, it'd be one less defender. I mean, no, there's still only one defender, and you'd have to play c3 in order to defend that again, but it doesn't really work because, you know, there's a pawn and a knight and a bishop all defending it. So that square is pretty controlled by black right now. Yeah, now XQC going in for attacking the knight. This knight now has to move, so maybe you're just going to move back. So that's kind of a wasted... Oh, no, not a wasted move. Not a wasted move. I, for some reason, thought that was defended. So that was a blunder. That was definitely a blunder. There's no counterplay here. So this is... Sadly, it looks like XQC is going to lose this game. But Yasuo taking that victory. Hopefully he doesn't You know, you usually, like I said, saw in the last game with Slicker and Nim. You know, he blundered a piece. It's equally likely that maybe Yasuo is going to get overconfident, and now he's going to blunder a piece back. So you know, that was everything was great until that move. That bishop is hanging. There's like nothing you can do about it. And you could even just trade off. Bishop takes knight, queen takes bishop, and White's doing fine here. White's up through an entire piece. There's really not anything that XQC can do here. It really kind of sucks for him. I'm sure he's pounding his chair right now. um, so yeah, I mean, obviously this is only round 1. So, and also there's still time on the clock, and there's still lots of game to be had. It is just kind of sad that he did use 5 minutes so far, and then he threw it away with one move. So, you know, Yasuo seems to be playing a lot stronger. Has only taken a few minutes. No, and even before that blunder from XQC, no real weaknesses in his position. So it does seem like Yasuo has a little bit more refinement than XQC so far. I mean, we could be surprised here. We could end up seeing a blunder, but so far it looks like all the pieces are under control. He could still just trade off that bishop for the knight. Like, go right ahead, you're up a piece, and then you could play rook e1, get control of the e file. Black really cannot do much here at all. Maybe the only thing you can do is maybe play knight d4, because this knight's pinned, and you could try to get that bishop out of the way. But either way, you're still trading pieces when you're already down a piece. So that's basically the only counterplay you have right now, is maybe trying to attack the bishop or attack the knight even. Okay, that saves the queen. Yeah, obviously you got to save the queen first. But like I said, like if you play this knight here, this is pinned, and then you could probably attack this even, and then weaken the pawn structure, and then maybe try to attack this again, and then try to get some control over that diagonal. But either way, you're down an entire piece. This is a very, like, you know, this is the under 1,000 level here. So, you know, anything can happen. You know, this is completely winning for for white with perfect play. Obviously, you know, we're not going to see perfect play here, but I mean, as long as you play safely as white, as long as you play safely and you don't give up the piece back, you're completely winning. At some point, it's just going to be too much to handle, and white will be able to come in for a victory. Oops. Yeah, not much XQC can do here. Maybe you can put some pressure on this knight here, because it is pinned. So maybe you can play e4. Okay, so you're just going to take the pawn there. It does open up this diagonal, but sadly you don't have a dark squared bishop to back that queen up, and you still have to trade off this knight. So if you had a dark squared bishop, this pawn right here on d7, where a dark squared bishop, you'd be able to take this here, and then after it takes, you'd be able to deliver checkmate. So that would be a huge threat. However, since there's no dark squared bishop behind the queen, that is not a threat at all. Now, if somehow you're able to get a knight into the game, but it's just too little too late at this point. You're already down an entire piece. There's not much you can do. And yeah, XQC gets a pawn back. So maybe there are chances here now. You can get one pawn back. Maybe you can get a second pawn back. And then it's not so clear. Not so clear who's going to win at that point. Maybe you would just connect knights. If you trade off knights, though, you're losing your attacking chances if you trade off pieces. Oh no, you wouldn't be able to trade because the queen. No, actually no. Never mind. Yeah, if you trade, the queen or the knight could attack, and it's not really too useful. Yeah, I'm seeing like attacking chances. You not focused so much on. I mean, maybe play h6. Get this bishop moved somewhere. Yeah, okay. Get this bishop moved back somewhere else, and you know, just kind of like restrict white. You know, make the advantage not so apparent, because your pieces are going to be stuck on your third rank. But all Yasuo has to do is just kind of hang back, and just as the game goes on, you know, that advantage is going to become more and more apparent. As long as you keep your cool, As long as you say, okay, well, I'm not going to freak out and try to attack too early. I'm not going to try to go in for some crazy trade that might end up with me getting checkmated. I'm just going to keep my pieces, hang back, save, and then wait for my opportunity to play some tactical abilities. I mean, if you bring your bishop back to d2, you're fine. You don't really have attacking chances, but it's fine. You know, there's no real chances for black to come in here either. And so now you're just going to attack the queen. So that is an opportunity. XQC hopefully remembers to defend this pawn. Yeah, but at any time, Yasuo can trade that knight, and then queen has to take, and then you take the pawn, and then you're up a piece again instead of just 2 pawns. So there's always there's a tactic there, because you're attacking the bishop, and there's no way to. I mean, you could defend the bishop this way, but there's 2 knights guarding. One of them's pinned, but you can still defend with this knight, and the queen can't recapture. So it would just be throwing away a knight for no reason, or you could. I mean, you would even just take with the bishop and then continue the attack on the queen and this pawn. So you have to defend the pawn if you want to keep any kind of chances. Oh no, you could trade this off. That works too. Oh no, you can't because of the pin. Yeah, so you'd like to trade that off, but you can't. So that's going to happen is you need to play queen d7 to defend the pawn, but then you can play bishop takes d5, check. And obviously you don't want to just get out of check because you're losing a piece, so you do queen takes bishop, queen takes d5, and then bishop takes on c7. And it doesn't seem like there's any real counterplay after that. Maybe you can play rook c8, but it's too late. You can even just go all the way back to bishop h2 at that point. So really not much to hope for XQC. It's really kind of you know, we've seen this pattern in this tournament a lot. You're gonna see players under the 1,000 level play like this. You know, like I play like this sometimes. Maybe not this badly, but I'm a little bit more refined than that. Even though I have a low rating, a little bit more refined than these players. I think it's just because they're, you know, as soon as they get used to what chess is and stop treating it like an FPS game, they're gonna be dominating. That's really all there is to it. And so now now you're just attacking the queen. You still have to come back and defend the pawn somehow, and you're still pinned at that point. I mean, you still also defend that knight. So either of these 2 moves works. I think what he wanted was he wanted to play bishop f7 so he could defend that twice, but I don't think that was obviously, as we found. Oh, so he's going to trade off, but then you lose a queen. We got a Botez Gambit live here. So not only is he losing, but he's losing by a large margin. So if he wanted to have any chances at all, he needed to play queen d7, and then after Yasuo does bishop takes d5 check, queen takes d5, and then Yasuo takes the pawn, and that would have been up only piece. But now at this point, he did not take the queen. He did not take the queen. He did not take the queen. Yasuo. And you have 6 minutes on your clock? Come on, buddy. Come on, bruh. Come on, bruh. You gotta take that queen. Why are you not taking that queen, buddy? Why are you not taking that queen? There's a Botez Gambit on the board, and you declined it. You're still winning. You're up 2 pawns, but at this time, I mean, now you can... Okay, now you're up a piece. Again, you're up an entire rook, but you could have just won that queen entirely. You could have just completely just dominated this. Maybe you just didn't want the fans to be bored. I can you know I can understand that, but I can understand that. I can kind of respect that. Oh, and yeah, now he's just completely losing. And oh, the queen takes. Good thing he takes that back. Yeah, it's quite a clown fiesta going on here. Are we gonna see him actually just take that rook? Yeah, Yasuo is completely destroying at this point. You can even just play queen h. After you you know, the queen moves. Okay, now you can just play queen h5, and you're threatening queen takes h6, check, and then there's a couple things you need to do first. Maybe actually just get this queen in rook lined up and try to trade off the queens. You're attacking the queen. But let's see, where can you go from here? Okay, just keep your queen around your king. That's a good strategy. Trying to prevent checkmates, but all Yasuo has to do is line up the queen and rook, and then bring the queen over here, and if queen trades, then you get the queen off the board, and you have a rook and an endgame, and it's gonna be over. I mean, it's gonna be over pretty soon either way. Not only that, but XQC only has a minute left, so this is kind of a shame that we saw a really balanced opening, but then piece right off the board for XQC, and then it's downhill from there. Yasuo did miss a free queen, so he declined a Botez Gambit, and so that's one thing. But he's still up material at that point, and then XQC just gave him away more material. So at that point, it's completely over. XQC just completely like threw this game away. Maybe he's super confident he's going to come back in the next round and just make a comeback and make it to the championship stage. He could still make it to the championship stage. So I'm pretty sure at this point, this is only round one. I feel like a lot of these players, since they don't come from a chess background, I don't think they quite understand the way that tournaments work in chess. I think they think that like as soon as they lose, they're out, and it's like that's not quite how it works in chess. Like it's you gotta prove yourself over time. It's not about one game. Sometimes it is about one game because it's the final game that matters, and we're gonna decide who wins everything. But like at that point, it's between who gets first and who gets second. Like it's at that point like it's not like winner takes all. It's like winner takes the most, and then the next person takes slightly less. I feel like they're in for a surprise. They're like, because you see a lot of these players in the interviews afterwards, just like, oh no, I'm out of the game. They're like, no, you can still come back. They're like, what? And they're like, oh yeah, there's more rounds and you get to play them. And, and they're like, oh, I can still make it. Okay. I don't think they quite understood the format, which is kind of funny. Yeah, now you have to like either move the king or trade off the queens. Either way, Yasuo is happy to trade off the queens. This is pretty much in the bag for Yasuo, unless he just completely, just for some reason, blunders everything. Like if he plays h4, yeah, and gives a check, and then it's gonna be checkmate pretty soon. Oh, and he just gives up a queen. Yeah, it's not immediately checkmate. He does have to bring the king in. Hey Kapchka, no, I'm actually gonna end the stream after this. Today was me covering the Pogchamps tournaments. I'm probably gonna be back later in in a few hours after I watch all the VODs and all that stuff, and take a nap, etc., etc. I'm gonna take a nap after this, and then I'm gonna be back to playing some rapid games and playing viewers. So, playing viewers after this later tonight. So, as no surprise to all of us, Yasuo wins this game by a large margin. It was actually it wasn't a surprise after this. Just completely giving up a bishop. Maybe if you played Queen E7. Oh no, if you play Queen E7, you're hanging the knight. So needed to move the bishop back. Because this knight's not going to be able to do much. This knight's not going to be able to do much. Or even just moving the knight over to f6 would have worked. Because the queen's defending that. If the knight takes with check, queen takes, and it's fine. You could also just... you could even move the knight over here, of all places. You can move the knight over here. But you can't ignore it because it's a little too slow. You're threatening to capture the knight, but sadly you just take the bishop. It's a thing called tempo that we have in chess, which a lot of these players are just starting to learn. A lot of these players are just starting to learn what tempo is because you want to be able to capture that knight, but you can't because you just take it. And at that point, it's just completely downhill. Now, I feel like maybe Yasuo got scared here because maybe he thought there was like an extra piece. Maybe he was scared that if the queen was here on g6, this would have been necessary. Because if the queen was on g6, you'd be threatening mate. However, the queen is on e6. And so you don't have to take that bishop. You can actually just straight up take the queen. And so that is kind of an oversight. That is an oversight from Yasuo, and continuing to give. But here. And so after that blunder from Yasuo, XQC could have held on to the game. Oops. And I talked about it during the game as well. let me go backwards here. It's like way over here. It was at this point. You could have got the game back at this point because you missed a free rook, Yasuo, so you should have punished that. You should have punished that because the threat here is that you're threatening this piece twice. Okay, yeah, now you're threatening this piece twice. Okay, so you can't go. What I was talking about can't happen because then you could just do this, and you can't take because the queen takes. So never mind. I was wrong about that. I forgot that there is a queen there now. So definitely Yasuo should have just taken the queen, but at the same time, now there's like absolutely no counterplay from black. So it's just over at that point. You can't take there. And so I mean going here as well, like he saves the queen to her, like, you know, maybe going here. Like that might have been okay. Then you can still check, but then you just move the king. You still lose material. I mean, oh no, just moving the queen here. This is what I was looking at. If you just move the queen here, you're still going to win a pawn because after check, you take, and then you win the... This is what I was calculating, yeah. I was thinking that XQC could have stayed in the game if he saw this. If he saw the threat, and instead of ignoring it by taking... I mean, I guess he was counterattacking the queen. At the same time, you could have just taken the queen, and then you would have a rook way up in your opponent's territory, and then after takes, and you win the piece, and you get the piece back. But either way, I think, you know, it works out. Because, oh yeah, obviously, if you take the, you know, if you just take the queen, okay, that was another oversight for me, because the threat here is to take the queen. So if you take here, you take here, take here, but you're ready to double up your rooks at this point. And maybe, and just like, you're in your opponent's territory, and there's just all sorts of things going on here. But yeah, in this position though, after the rook's being attacked, I think XQC could have really saved the position instead of trying to trade off. Because when you're down material, you do not want to trade off. But at the same time, let's see. This is what happened. Yeah, at the same time, it's like now there's too many pieces attacking this, so it's like you could have just moved your queen back, and then after this, you lose a pawn, but at least now you're no longer like worried about like queens getting over to the king side. And yeah, there is a rook controlling the e-file, but I still feel like, I mean, obviously, since dropping a piece, completely losing for XQC at that point. This is definitely, this F5 move, F5 generally a bad idea to begin with, in most situations, maybe 9 times out of 10. Although in that 1 times out of 10, it's really powerful, so, yeah, there is definitely a piece under fire here, and you can't ignore that. Even just playing Queen E7, defending the bishop, but you even could have just moved the bishop back. Could have moved the bishop back here. Could have. I can't play there. You can play Queen E7, but then you would lose the knight. So it's like you got to defend the knight and the bishop. So you keep the queen here, and you just move the bishop back, and it's fine. You could even just go a little risky and play here, play bishop d4, but then you just play c3, and then you have to go back anyway. So just go straight back to a7 or b6. So bishop b6 or bishop a7, depending on where you want your rooks to play, and depending on where you want to make a pawn break. Either way, that was a pretty exciting round. There's only 2 games today instead of 3 in today's round. Let me just double check that. So June 6th, there's 2 games, and we just covered the second one. And we covered Group C and Group B. And we will be back for more Pogchamps coverage tomorrow. We'll be back for more Pogchamps coverage tomorrow at 12 p.m. Pacific time. And then there's going to be 3 games tomorrow. So 12 p.m., 1 p.m., and 2 p.m. It's just going to be back to back. 12 p.m., 1 p.m., and 2 p.m. So I will. That's all my responsibility for Pogchamps today. Obviously, I have absolutely zero responsibility. I'm doing this on my own, so obviously, but I'm trying to treat it as a responsibility because I feel like this is an important thing for me to cover. You know, this is a big event, and I'm going to be. I've uploaded the first round on YouTube. I mean, the first 3 games on YouTube. I'm going to highlight. Split this apart by highlight both of these games and the coverage and upload to YouTube after this. But I'm going to take a nap first. I'm going to be back later in the evening to play games against viewers and to just play rapid games. Just do my own chess for the day. I already did a whole bunch of Mate and 1 puzzles, like I think like 200 of them earlier. I got my Mate and 1s for the day, and I think that's good for pattern recognition. And I think it's better instead of doing more tactics, because I mean Mate and 1s aren't technically tactics; they're more like just Mate and 1s. I guess that you would call them end games. They're not end games. They're just Mate and 1s. And it's always important for me to look for Mate and 1s because I do lose to them. Like a good chunk of a good chunk of my games are lost to like Mate and 1s that I just miss. And so I do need to work on those. But I did like 200 of those, and I feel like doing any other kind of tactics would just kind of muddle that. And so later tonight, I'm going to be playing some rapid games, hopefully against viewers. There's always the pairing pool. There's infinite content on the chess category. Anyway, thanks for stopping. Oh, oops. Thanks for stopping by, everyone. Yeah. But I will be back later to play some rapid games against viewers, and tomorrow we will be back at 12 p.m. Pacific Time. 12 p.m., 1 p.m., and 2 p.m. are the next 3 games for round 2 of the Pogchamps tournament. See you then. Bye!